Joel has worked for 30 years working with indigent people. His primary focus right now is death penalty cases and trying to keep people off death penalty. He also works for the Los Angeles Police Commission, in which part of their job is to hold officers accountable, making sure that they follow the same laws as you do. I also, on behalf of Ms. Murphy and I, want to give a big thank you to Joel and his wife Yolanda, who works for the Santa Monica Ed Foundation. It is through them that we have this amazing experience to listen to Reverend Lawson speak. So on behalf of us and our entire 8th grade, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Cori and Tisha. They also, well, maybe I neglected to remind them that I also helped start the mock trial program here at John Adams Middle School and was a coach for many years. And they're going to have to twist my arm, but I'm sure if they twist my arm hard enough, I can come back and coach again in the future, if needed. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you a man, Reverend Lawson. And to those of you that don't know him, if we could move on to the next slide. William, could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Reverend Lawson grew up in Ohio, and while he was in college, he left Ohio and went to India to study Mahatma Gandhi's practice of nonviolent resistance, which what Mahatma Gandhi did was help to liberate India from the colonialism of Great Britain by using nonviolence. Reverend Lawson studied there and then brought that philosophy back to the U.S. and started educating here in the U.S. And it was while in Ohio, I believe at Oberlin University, he was introduced to Reverend Martin Luther King, who was similarly interested in using nonviolence to confront Jim Crow and the oppression that people of color suffered in this country. If we go on to the next slide. My understanding, and I could have it possibly wrong, but my understanding is that Reverend King said to you, Mr. Lawson, we need you to come to the South. That's where we need you to be, because that's where it is most acute in this country. We go on. Reverend Lawson then took the principles of nonviolence and started teaching students the principles of nonviolence. And he helped to organize those students and create a plan to go forward and to integrate lunch counters. If we could go to the next slide. Because at the time, people of color couldn't go into a restaurant and sit down and eat. If you were a person of color, they would say, you're not allowed to sit here. This is reserved for white people only. Go around to the back and maybe we'll give you a sandwich if we care to. And he organized the students, if we go on to the next slide. And the students were I apologize. Not surprisingly, there was tremendous resistance, which included violence, abuse, horrible things. But rather than resisting and fighting back, the students took it, even the violence. And the police came and arrested the students rather than the people that were attacking them. If you could go on to the next slide. Multiple people were arrested. I don't mean to embarrass Reverend Lawson, but I'm sure it's nothing he would be embarrassed by. But he was arrested multiple times in his lifetime because he had the audacity to demand that everyone should have human dignity. If we could go on. His movement went from helping to integrate lunch counters to train stations and airports and bus stations and motels. It also included going on to demand equal pay and voting rights for everyone. And it's a movement that continues to this day. If we go on. Back one more slide, please. Back one more, I'm sorry. Reverend Lawson and Martin Luther King and Reverend Abernathy and other great leaders and Congressman Lewis even though they may have passed, even though they aren't with us today, if we go on to the next slide, the movement still continues to this day. And I've known Reverend Lawson. I met him years ago because his son and I worked together at the public defender's office. And I met him, and I found him to be an inspirational person. And if we go on to the next slide, I asked him, and he graciously decided to come here to share some of his thoughts. And so I'm going to start off with a few questions, and then we're going to open it up to students for you to ask your questions as well. So it is my great honor to introduce Reverend James Lawson.
Could I have the lights turned up so I can see people?
I think he wants to be able to see the audience.
I want to see the audience.
Perfect.
That's better. Well, let me tell you, I'm very, very pleased to be here and to be with those of you who are 8th graders at the John Adams Middle School. I will try to be very short and brief, but I've been a teacher, preacher all my life. I am still teaching at Cal State Northridge, where I'm teaching a course for the semester on how you create change, how you can transform your life, and have a great sense of being who you are and why you are. And do this without hating other people, and certainly not hating yourself. Do this without shooting a gun, killing people. I'll simply say to you, each of you is an extraordinarily unique person. The scientific world says that maybe 95 to 96% of you are the same as the 8 billion people of the earth. We're supposed to reach 8 billion people as a human race this year, 2023. They don't know quite when, but they say we will have 8 billion people in the human race as of 2023. Here is the astonishing thing. Each of you, however, has perhaps 96, 97% similar to 8 billion other people, but approximately 3% of you is totally unique. According to science, not a single one of you have the same DNA. Not a single one of you have the same fingerprints. It's rather astonishing. But that's not the only astonishing thing about you and about us. A great combine of scientific centers around the earth. Cosmologists, astrophysicists. Just a year ago now, exactly, almost a year ago, they put 1 million miles out into space. The Webb telescope. It replaced the old Huddleston telescope. They expect to find the origins of